Welcome to the Taste Test channel, and in this video we'll be taking an impartial look at popular peanut butter from around the world to discover how some of the best-selling varieties around the globe differ in taste. I'll also be trying my first ever peanut butter and jelly sandwich with today's winner, which I have to admit, having never tried one nor had the desire to, I'm slightly nervous about. In our lineup today we have the #1 peanut butter on the planet, Jif from the USA. A popular brand from Denmark, organic option Salling. Another international bestseller, fellow American brand Skippy. Australia's favourite peanut butter, Bega. India's fast-growing homegrown brand, Pintola. And finally, long-established historical UK favourite, Sunpat. As always, just for fun, we'll be awarding our Taste Test Channel Best in Class award to the winner, and if you're new to the channel, why not hit subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss any of our regular taste tests. So, peanut butter, do you love it, hate it, or maybe have it in the cupboard but ignore it for most of the year? Well, the answer may well depend on where in the world you live. Although available globally, some countries, such as Japan and much of France, are said to find the very idea of it abhorrent. The average European eats less than a tablespoon of it a year, while Americans get through a whopping 3 pounds of the stuff each annually, most commonly featuring in the famous PB&J, the peanut butter and jelly sandwich. The average US school kid is said to have eaten about 2,000 of these before they even leave high school. As for me, I've never ever had one, but will be trying my first with the winner of this taste test. So, peanut butter has actually been around for longer than you might think. The Incas and Aztecs ground roasted peanuts into a paste centuries ago, but its modern form began in the late 1800s, with the first patent going to a Canadian chemist in 1884. Despite its name, there's no butter in it, it's simply ground roast peanuts, often along with extra oil, sugar and salt. But the quantities used, the grinding and blanching process, type of oils added and how it's seasoned all dramatically affect the taste. And of course the texture, which is another big divider. Do you like it smooth or prefer it crunchy? Well, for this test we had to pick one and we've chosen crunchy versions and original recipes where more than one were available. Obviously there's plenty more brands out there to choose from, including an increasing amount of all-natural just peanut recipes, but our lineup here includes some of the most popular from all around the world. So moving on to price, there's quite a bit of variation, and although we ignore delivery charges, hidden import duties no doubt affect some of these prices, so costs may well differ depending on where you're based. The amount in each jar varies, so you can see the price I paid per 100 grams is shown below. As you can see, Bega from Australia was the most expensive, but no doubt would be much cheaper down under, and US brand Skippy, which I didn't have to import as you can buy it in the UK, was the cheapest. Nutritional wise, because it's made of nuts, peanut butter contains lots of protein, along with vitamins and minerals, but on the flip side, a high fat and energy content. Nevertheless, it varies from jar to jar, so the chart below lists the brands from top to bottom in energy content per 100 grams. As you can see, Sunpat from the UK has the most energy and the US Jif has the least. I should just mention that the kilojoules shown on the Indian Pintola jar were actually this, but that doesn't correspond with the calories they've printed and seems unfeasibly low, so we've assumed calories to be correct on all jars and adjusted the kilojoules accordingly. Moving on to fat content shows that UK Sunpat and the Aussie Bega have the most fat and American Skippy has the least. Skippy tops the charts on sugar, however, and Salling from Denmark has the least, with no added sugars in it at all. Finally, salt or sodium content shows that Australian Bega has the most by quite a margin, and India's Pintola has the least. But how will all of this affect the taste? Well, as I like to say, that's why we're here. So we'll start our test with the most popular peanut butter in the world, Jif. Jif's been around for over 60 years, since Procter & Gamble bought Big Top peanut butter in the 50s, reformulated the recipe and launched it as Jif. It was sweeter and less dry than other brands at the time, with added oil and molasses, and with free samples handed out door to door, their success went from strength to strength. Fittingly, they're now owned by the J.M. Smucker Company, America's biggest jam or jelly brand, which means that the classic PB&J pairing are now in harmony under the same roof. Peanut percentage isn't stated on the jar, but legally any peanut butter in the US must contain minimum 90% peanuts. No palm oil in this one, but somewhat ironically, their natural option does currently contain it, so do check the jar if you're not sure. So what we're going to do is open all the pots first so we can compare the contents visually side by side, and then we'll move on to the tasting. So let's open up the jar, take a look inside, and serve some out. So initially firm to scoop into and then some give. There's lots of big pieces of nuts visible, and aroma-wise, very nutty. I think that's going to be the case for all the brands, but I'll let you know if anything different stands out. And I'll look forward to tasting it after we've opened the others. Next, organic option Salling from Denmark. Denmark is apparently a bigger fan of peanut butter than much of Europe, but leans towards the more natural style recipes, hence this organic or Oko jar, which just contains ground peanuts and salt. Salling Group is actually the name of Denmark's most popular retail chain. The family Salling created Føtex, the country's first supermarket, as well as their first hypermarket, and the discount store chain Netto. They produce a whole range of own brand goods, including the jar we have here. Peanut content is a whopping 99%, so the good news is no palm oil, which shamefully is not always the case for organic brands. So again, do check the label if you're trying to avoid it. So let's see what it's like inside. Wow, very runny this one. Look how thin and sloppy that is. Very glossy and oily, smaller nut pieces, and the aroma is different on this one, much more deep and earthy. Don't worry about the drips, by the way, there's a Jack Russell with his mouth open just under the camera. Next, another international bestseller and fellow American brand, Skippy. Skippy started out in 1920s California with the somewhat less catchy name Luncheon Brand. It was the creation of a man who'd invented a hydrogenation process to stop the oil and peanut separating in the jar. The name was changed to Skippy in 1933. Nothing to do with kangaroos, by the way. It apparently coincided with a very successful comic strip series about a boy called Skippy Skinner, which led to a legal feud about the use of the name, which continues into this century. It's now owned by Hormel Foods, sold in over 60 countries, and is also the top-selling peanut butter in China. Again, no palm oil in this one, but you will find it in their no sugar and natural options. Peanut content is 91%. And let's open up the pot. So back to a much more set looking consistency. And that's down to the added oil and hydrogenation process that this chap invented and most brands use now. It essentially binds it all together, so you get this thicker, more even paste. But we'll see how good the texture really is in the tasting section. Next, Australia's favourite peanut butter, Bega. Now, the spread inside this jar has been an Aussie favourite for over 55 years. The recipe's the same it's always been, produced in the same Melbourne factory, but up until 2012 it belonged to and bore the label of US brand Kraft. When Kraft sold the recipe and factory in 2012, Aussie cheese company Bega changed the name and announced to Australians that Kraft peanut butter was now Bega. Kraft weren't best pleased about this messaging or the fact the packaging looked the same, and another peanut butter-based legal battle ensued. Now there's a sentence that sticks to the roof of your mouth. The courts, however, ruled in Bega's favour, and the product is now a truly Australian brand. It's known for the strapline "never oily, never dry", so we'll have to see. No palm oil listed in the crunchy variety, but the smooth option does contain it. Peanut content is lower on this one at 86%. So let's take a look inside. Again, a smooth, set surface. And it comes out quite firm and fudgy. I've taken a second spoon of it here just to show you a bigger portion, and I'd say possibly the fewest nut chunks so far. But big pieces and certainly a well-mixed, non-oily consistency. So I'll look forward to trying it. Next, India's favourite and fastest growing peanut butter brand, Pintola. The company is a relative newcomer to the market, starting in just 2015, but growing exponentially. It's interesting because despite India being the second largest global producer of peanuts, they had no domestic peanut butter brands, and it tended to be a privilege of the wealthy. Enter Kamlesh Patel, the son of a pomegranate farmer with peanut butter ambitions, who made his dad's vision a reality. Marketed as protein-packed fuel, it aims to be an affordable household item in India and abroad, and comes in a range of different flavours, including honey and chocolate. Peanut content on this one is 91%. Sadly, it does contain palm oil, and unusually for peanut butter, it says to refrigerate after opening. But let's see what it's like. Okay, wow, so very separated and liquid at the top, much more so than the organic one, which is surprising as this does contain hydrogenated oil. There's a fudgy firmness underneath and a glossy, oily and drippy exterior. But I'll be curious to try it. Finally, the UK's historical favourite brand, Sunpat. Sunpat, the only peanut butter I knew of as a kid, spent decades unrivalled as the UK's leading brand, right up until 2015 when it was overtaken by the Whole Earth label. It's been around since 1946, launched by a family business in London, and currently markets itself as the nation's best tasting brand, so we'll have to see. Ownership has changed several times over the years, and it's now part of US firm Hain Celestial Group. As for palm oil, it's not listed on the jar, but their website reveals that their stabiliser E471 does contain it, so that's a bit under the radar. Peanut content is 95%. And let's take a look inside. So very smooth and set on the top, and firm and fudgy to scoop out. Various sized chunks in there, quite a dense texture, no oil visible, and I'd say the thickest and firmest of the lot. And we'll see how it tastes in just a moment. So looking at them all now side by side, you can see the variations even more clearly. Salling from Denmark stands out as both the darkest and by far the runniest. It almost looks like a tiny bowl of nutty soup there, followed by Pintola from India, which is also quite soft and oily. UK Sunpat and Aussie Bega look like the thickest and fudgiest, while American Jif and Skippy have more of a stiff-whipped consistency. But with all that in mind, I'm now really curious to find out just how much they vary in taste. Now, as well as in sandwiches, people eat this stuff by the spoonful, on slices of apple, in baking. There's also something called ants on a log, which is apparently a peanut butter-filled celery stick with raisins lined up all along it. Okay. And of course the Elvis favourite, deep-fried peanut butter, banana and bacon sandwiches. Yikes. I will of course be trying my first PB&J with the winner, but for now I'm going to exercise traditional British reserve and simply try these on toast. So we'll rustle some up. And let's move on to the tasting. So we'll start with the global favourite, Jif. So this is very different to any peanut butter I've tried before. I'm not sure we have versions like this in the UK. It's really unexpectedly light, with a whipped, almost buttercream consistency. It literally melts in the mouth. Lots of large nut pieces with a satisfying crunch, and just the right amount of salt and sweetness to enhance the nutty flavour. I know Americans like their sugar, so I was expecting this to be a lot sweeter, but it's just right, and if you are used to the natural options, this does not taste over the top. In short, a totally new peanut butter experience for me, and a very enjoyable one. Next, organic option Salling from Denmark. So far less light, this is runny and oily, but also sticky as you eat it. Lots of small chunks of nut, but the flavour is very different. There's deep earthy tones, much more so than other natural peanut butters I've tried, and it dominates the taste. There is only peanuts and salt in this one, so no sweetness, and it could be the type of peanuts or the roasting, but there's almost cardboard notes in its earthiness, which adds bitterness. Also slight hints of cardamom or medicinal tones in the aftertaste. In all, not a fan of this one. It's not awful, but I wouldn't choose it. Next, we'll try the globally popular Skippy from the US. So much more like Jif, light and whipped and creamy, but not quite the same melt-in-the-mouth quality, a touch more sticky. It's sweeter too, and the sugar hits you ahead of the salt in this one, whereas Jif was salty, then sweet, which I think works better with peanuts. Again, nice big crunchy pieces, fewer chunks than Jif, but it could well contain the same or more nuts overall. There's a nice nutty flavour. To conclude, sweeter than I would choose, but not over the top, and perfectly good. Next, we'll try Australian favourite, Bega. So this is more like the peanut butter I'm used to in the UK. Thick, cloying and sticks straight to the roof of your mouth. Flavour-wise, this is the first one where I've noticed the taste of the oil. It's not oily or separated, but there's vegetable oil flavour in the paste, in addition to peanuts. Less chunks of nut than the other three, but still a good amount. The sugar is subtle, but it's much saltier than the others, more than is needed, I'd say. In summary, perfectly acceptable, but not the best. Next, we'll try Pintola from India. So this needed a bit of a stir before spreading, but didn't overly want to mix. Thick clay at the bottom with thin watery oil on top, but I got there in the end. The mouthfeel though is much better than it looked, and surprisingly it does melt in the mouth, leaving small fragments of crunchy peanut. It's much sweeter than the others and less salty too, so slightly reminiscent of a pudding or dessert. In all, a good texture once mixed, but oily and a bit too sweet for my taste. Finally, we'll try Sunpat from the UK. Okay, so this is a texture I remember, thick, fudgy and almost sticks your mouth closed. It feels a bit like clay, you really need to squish it to get through it. However, the flavour is really good. It's definitely the most nutty tasting of the group. It is of course 95% nuts, but the chunks are big, medium, small and in fragments, so the nut flavour goes all the way through and seems to have extra dimension. The seasoning works really well, the salt's just right to enhance the peanuts, and the sugar's there but subtle. In short, if you like a texture that gives your mouth a workout, you'd be hard pushed to beat this for flavour. It's a lot nicer than I thought. So that covers how they all differ in taste, and now that we've tasted them all, as always, just for fun, we award our Taste Test Channel winners and Best in Class award. And as promised, I'll also be trying my first ever peanut butter and jelly sandwich right after this. For this taste test, I found it quite easy to pick the 3 best tasting, but the order to place them in was a bit more challenging. But to summarise, if you like your peanut butter thick and fudgy, try Bega for a salty kick, or Sunpat for maximum peanut flavour. If you prefer an oily finish, then Pintola is a sweet, low salt option, or Salling is a sugar-free, earthy organic choice. Or if a soft whipped texture appeals, choose Jif for balanced seasoning, or Skippy for slightly sweeter notes. But our top 3 winners are as follows. Winning 3rd place, Skippy from the US. Light and creamy with plenty of nuts and a great texture. A very nice peanut butter. Winning 2nd place, Sunpat from the UK. Granted, this is difficult to eat, being the thickest of the lot, but it had the best peanut flavour of all, and there is a certain appeal in the texture. Plus, with lower sugar, it also fits well between the natural and standard options. If you like your peanut butter thick, you might just love it. But in first place this week in the popular peanut butters from around the world, the Taste Test Channel Best in Class award goes to Jif from the USA. This ticked all the boxes for me. The light whipped texture literally melts in the mouth, the nuts are crunchy and full of flavour, and the seasoning's spot on. I'm not sure it will convert me to eating PB&Js, but it did keep calling me back to the jar, and I'm not a big peanut butter eater. A well-deserved winner, so well done to Jif from the USA. And as always, taste is subjective, and this is purely my point of view, but I hope it's provided some useful insights. And now, as promised, I will be trying my first ever peanut butter and jelly sandwich using the winner of our taste test, Jif from the US. As a Brit, PB&Js are not really something that feature in the UK. The idea, in fact, leaves me cold, and I have to say the combination just seems wrong. But here we go. Apparently, the most popular jelly or jam to use is either grape, which again we don't really have in the UK, or strawberry. So for the full American experience, I'll be using strawberry flavour Smuckers. But if you're curious about the best jams, do check out our strawberry jam taste test as well. So Jif peanut butter on one side and Smucker's jelly on the other. And we sandwich together. There's a whole debate about crusts on or crusts off, so not to take a side, I'll try both. And here we go. Oh, sweet baby Jesus. Well, that's weird. I guess it's got that salt and sugar mixture people like in salted caramel or honey roasted nuts. It's the jelly texture that somehow feels more wrong though than the peanut butter. I'm not liking the pockets of cold sweet jam. And that's what you get, a thick, sticky, nutty, savoury coated bread that does stick to the roof of your mouth, along with pouches or bursts of sugary jam. If I had to pick one, crust on is more preferable to me to offset the sweetness, but I don't think I'll be making any more of these anytime soon. But hey, at least I've tried it, even if it is an unwelcome addition to my bucket list. In fairness though, if I'd been raised on these, I'm sure I'd feel completely different, and no doubt I'd love it, but my reserved British taste buds were not quite ready for such an assault to the senses. I now need counselling. So, several hours of meditation and therapy later, I really hope you've enjoyed watching this episode. If you have, do check out our other taste tests, and a massive, massive thank you from me to all you kind people who like, comment, support, and particularly share our videos with fellow food fans. It really does make all the difference. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to ensure you don't miss any of our regular taste tests. Meanwhile, thanks for watching, go nuts, spread the word, and I'll see you next time.